In this video, we're talking about two of the biggest releases of the year, the Adidas Predator Elite and the Nike Phantom GX2. So I'm going to compare the feature sets of both of these boots and talk about what they're actually like to play in. Then at the end of the video, you can decide which of these models is going to be best for you. And if you're interested in picking up either the Predator or the new Phantom, you can find links to them on sale with discount codes in the description below. So to kick things off, let's talk about the design differences between these two boots. Now, starting things off with the Predator Elite from Adidas, the brand really went back to basics in terms of both the construction of this model and the overall aesthetics. It's definitely pretty reminiscent of Predator models that we saw from 10 to 20 years ago. And that makes a lot of sense because Adidas is trying to play off of the fact that this is the 30th anniversary for the Predator that was released in 1994. And just one example of that more retro design is going to be the fact that the new Predator Elite has a really open V-shaped lacing system here in contrast to the one-piece uppers that we saw in previous Predator models. And the upper itself is going to be constructed from Adidas's new Hybrid Touch 2.0 material. Now, in terms of how that Hybrid Touch 2.0 actually feels, it's definitely going to have a softness and a pliability to it, but it is noticeably thicker compared to the upper that you're going to get on the GX2. I think in some ways, Adidas is almost trying to replicate a leather-like feeling with this upper, but it is a little bit more rigid than you would get from a softer calf leather or kangaroo leather material. But if protection is something that you value in your football boot, the Predator Elite is going to have a thicker and more protective upper than just about anything else in the Adidas line. And then on the instep of the football boot, you're going to have the star of the show, and that's going to be the strike skin elements. They are definitely really sticky, and I think Adidas actually did a pretty good job placing them just on the inside of the boot here, because that's where you're going to need it 90% of the time, and then the outside of the foot here is going to have a much smoother matte finish. Moving to the heel area, you are going to have a really soft and padded heel liner, which has definitely been a strong point of Adidas models recently. Then in terms of the sole plate with the new Predator Elite, Adidas have gone really simple here just with these relatively short tri-star studs. And while these studs are relatively aggressive, they're not going to be quite as aggressive as the longer bladed studs that you get in the GX2. But that being said, this model of the Predator Elite is sold specifically for use on firm ground natural grass, so if you are a player that's more often on artificial grass, you can find AG variations from Adidas. In fact, this year, Adidas has actually released two dedicated AG models to go along with the Predator Elite. There's going to be one that's for use on 2G and 3G surfaces, and then one that's for use on 4G surfaces, which are a little bit softer and do a better job of replicating actual natural grass. Then in terms of the sole plate tooling here, it's going to be extremely rigid, having almost no bend in the midfoot whatsoever, and then just a minimal amount of snap towards the toe box area. Even by the standards of modern football boots, this is definitely one of the most rigid sole plates that I've come across. And I think overall, in terms of the design of this boot, Adidas did a great job bringing more retro elements back into this model, because I think, personally speaking, as a fan and as a player, I really like the look of these more iconic Predators, and I think that this design shows that Adidas is actually listening to players in terms of what features they want. Now, in contrast to the new Predator Elite, the Phantom GX2 is going to be pretty much as modern as it gets. The GX2 is going to have a sleek one-piece upper with a brand new update to their really popular grip knit material. So previously with the original Phantom GX, the grip knit was essentially just a cover that went over the fly knit base of the football boot. But with the new GX2, the grip knit is actually interconnected with the fly knit construction. Then instead of the GX2 having just a really sticky material here, it's also going to have these ribbed elements that give you even more traction on the ball. Now that grip knit material is going to transition to fly knit towards the center of the boot just under the lacing system, and that's what's going to make these boots feel really flexible around the midfoot and give them that kind of sock-like sensation on feet. And that fly knit is going to continue up the lacing system all the way around the collar, where you're also going to get a really comfortable padded heel liner inside of the boot. And I think Nike have also done a really good job with the design of the new GX2 because they took a look at the reception for the original GX and people really seem to be a fan of the new grip knit material, and they essentially just expanded upon it and made an even better advancement to that new technology. And they've also made a couple changes to how this boot fits, which we're going to talk about later in this video. Then when it comes to the sole plate, you're going to see another major change with the GX2 compared to the original GX, and that's with the addition of this Cyclone 360 stud configuration in the forefoot. Now, we first saw this stud configuration introduced in the Phantom Luna that came out last year, and the main purpose of this design is to help reduce rotational traction when you're on the balls of the feet, and that's intended to help reduce the possibility of injury. Now, all of that being said, the studs on this firm ground version are going to be pretty long, pretty sharp, and I would definitely only recommend using this model on firm natural grass. But thankfully, Nike does offer great artificial grass variations of all of their football boots, and you can find them just by searching the model of the boot with the AG Pro sole plate. And I'll try and put links to the AG variation in the description below as well. And then as far as the actual tooling for the sole plate here, I would say it is fairly rigid, but not quite as rigid as the Predator Elite. Next up, let's talk about the fit and feel of these two boots. So to start things off, as far as sizing goes, I would definitely recommend getting both of these models in true to size. I'm typically a size 10.5 US, and that size worked perfect for me in both of these models. But other than the sizing of these boots being the same, the fit they offer is actually pretty different. Starting off with the Predator Elite here, you're definitely going to get a slightly more open sensation when putting on these football boots thanks to that traditional lacing system and that V-shaped design. And that lacing system does go really deep all the way up to the top of the ankle, so you're going to get great lockdown when tying these boots as well. The only slight note I'll mention about the V-shaped lacing system as opposed to a traditional U-shaped lacing system is that you are going to have a little bit less adjustability when it comes to the toe box area. And that's just due to the fact that the lacing system is going to taper as it runs down the midfoot here. Then as far as the width of the Predator Elite, I would say it's not the widest boot that Adidas offers, but it also isn't the most narrow. It's about in the middle in terms of their entire product line. For example, I feel that the Predator Elite is going to be a little bit wider than the Copa Pure 2, which I find to be really snug, but it's not quite as wide as the Copa Gloro, which is the traditional leather boot that Adidas offers. I found that the width was really great, especially towards the midfoot, but towards the toe box, this boot does taper pretty aggressively. Then when you get these boots on for the first time, you are definitely going to notice that the Hybrid Touch upper does have that noticeable thickness to it. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it's definitely not going to have the same sensitivity and flexibility that you would get from the GX2. So final notes on the fit and feel for the Predator Elite, I think it is a comfortable football boot. I enjoyed wearing them, and I think they are going to be good for most foot shapes, but it's important to realize that these just aren't going to be a minimalist boot. And then when it comes to the GX2, although these boots are only 20 grams lighter than the Predator Elite, they are going to feel noticeably more minimal on feet. And I think that's mostly because the grip knit upper that you get on the GX2 is just going to be thinner and more flexible. Now, as I mentioned previously, the GX2 is going to be a one-piece upper design, and one-piece upper football boots can sometimes feel a little bit too snug throughout the foot. But I really didn't feel that that was the case with the new GX2 because there was just so much volume throughout the midfoot here. So while the boots still did a pretty good job at hugging my feet when I was wearing them, I never felt too claustrophobic in these boots. And I do think the fit of the GX2 is improved in that regard compared to the original GX, which I personally found to just be a little bit too narrow. But then similar to the Predator Elite, I would say that the GX2 isn't the widest boot that Nike offers, and it's also not the most narrow. I would say it's going to be slightly wider than the Mercurial Vapor or the Superfly 9, but it's a little bit more narrow compared to the Tiempo Legend 10 or the Nike Premier 3. So just like the Predator Elite from Adidas, the GX2 sits around the middle of Nike's lineup in terms of width. And then also with the GX2 here, you're going to get a slightly offset lacing system, which has kind of become synonymous with the Phantom design. And despite the fact that the lacing system is a little bit off to the side, I still felt that the lockdown with the GX2 was very even and comfortable. And then another thing I noticed as soon as I got these boots on feet is that the upper is going to be a little bit less restrictive compared to the Predator Elites, and that's mostly just due to, as I mentioned, the flexibility of that design. So if you like having a slightly softer, more sock-like upper, then the GX2 might be a better option for you. Next up, let's talk about what these boots were like to play in. So continuing straight away with the Phantom GX2, these boots are going to give you a really close touch on the ball. You're definitely going to have more sensitivity in comparison to the slightly thicker upper that you get with the Predator Elite. And in addition to having a close touch on the ball, you're also going to have a really noticeably sticky touch on the ball as well. Now that did take me a little bit to get used to, and I found it had the biggest impact when it came to dribbling. Now, while I do wish that the toe box on the GX2 was a little bit wider at the top of the boot, I actually didn't have too many issues when it came to the width across the toe box, just because there was so much volume in this football boot. You can even see that when I press down on the top of the boot here, how much space that you get. So I found that the upper was able to flex to the shape of my foot when I was playing. And then when it comes to the sole plate, as I mentioned, this is going to be a really aggressive sole plate, and although I was testing these out on artificial grass, I found them just to be a little bit too aggressive for use on that surface, and sometimes found them cutting in a little bit too deep to the pitch. So I would recommend, if you play on AG, to check out those artificial grass variations, but if you oftentimes play on firm ground, this is definitely going to be a really solid sole plate. And then when it comes to the Predator Elite, these are definitely going to be much more substantial boots on feet. And once again, that's definitely not necessarily a bad thing, it just depends on what you're looking for. Compared to the other models that Adidas offers, this boot definitely kind of feels like a tank on feet. They give you a noticeably more solid feeling when you lace them up. So obviously you're going to be working with a slight trade-off there, because they're going to offer you more protection, but slightly less sensitivity compared to the GX2. So if you are someone that likes having a really close touch on the ball, that's something that you would want to keep in mind. Then because the Predator Elite is actually going to have a matte finish for most of the football boot, you're not going to have that same sticky feeling when you're dribbling the ball. And I actually kind of appreciate that, because I don't always love the ball being glued to my feet when I'm trying to dribble. Then in terms of the strike skin elements, I do think they're going to help you get a little bit more traction on your shots and curved long balls. But in terms of overall shooting and being able to get spin on the ball, I would say these two boots are pretty much a tie. And then over to the sole plate with the Predator Elite, although I did feel it was pretty aggressive on artificial grass, I actually felt it was a little bit safer to use compared to the Phantom GX2, but if you do mostly play on artificial grass, it's nice that Adidas does have those other variations that you can check out. Next up, let's talk about the value of these two boots. So when it comes to the bang for your buck, I would say that these two boots are neck and neck, and they are both pretty expensive. Because as of right now, they both retail for $260. Now, thankfully, if you are on a budget, both of these boots have takedown models that come in at a more affordable price. And additionally, as you see new colorways get released for these models, you should see some variations start to go on sale. So what are my final thoughts on how these two boots compare to each other? So at the end of the day, I think these are both great football boots with their own advantages and disadvantages. If you're looking for a boot that has a more retro design with an open lacing system and that will offer more protection, I would definitely recommend checking out the Predator Elite. But if you're into more modern football boots that have that sock-like one-piece upper, I would recommend checking out the GX2. And personally, I do have to say, I like that the GX2 gives you a slightly closer touch on the ball and slightly more sensitivity compared to the Predator Elite. But at the end of the day, the boot that you prefer is going to come down to your personal preference. And that is going to do it for this video. So if you've gotten the chance to try on either of these boots, let me know what you think of them in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe because it really helps out the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.